morning, ladies and gentlemen. Well, my name's Stephen, and I am, I think, going to be an astronaut. Much to my surprise, really, not something I ever thought was going to happen. Anybody here ever dreamt of going to space, floating around in zero gravity? Fantastic. We'll see how many people want to do it at the end as well. It's always a good indication of how successful I've been. You know, I think that at the moment that we're worn down in some ways, and we're weary with the economic turmoil, political upheaval, and there is a bit of a sense that, you know, the great days of vision and exploration of breaking boundaries is over. I'm here this morning to tell you that it isn't. That vision is still very much alive. It's more than just a vision. It's tangible, it's real, it's happening.
I'd seen the moon landing as a young boy, and I just thought, you know, one day I'm going to do that. But years by year went by, and NASA didn't seem to be that interested in getting you or me into space. And so in about 1990, I suddenly thought, Virgin Galactic sounds like a good name. And so having registered the name Virgin Galactic, I had to do something about it.
Pressures look good. Retracting the feather.
Okay to lock. Locks are moving. Feathers down and locked.
To be perfectly honest, I think it would be very sad for anybody not to want to go to space. I mean, if you're inquisitive about life and inquisitive about the world around us, most of what's around us is space. And just, you know, to be able to look back at our fragile Earth from space and see the beauty of it is something that I'm sure that every single one of us would love to do if we had the opportunity.
Virgin Galactic. I first heard of Virgin Galactic about 7 years ago when I joined the company, and I must admit I was pretty excited by it because, you know, although I'd never really dreamt of going to space myself, certainly couldn't be called a space geek, I'd always had a lot of admiration for Richard Branson as somebody that got things done, did things in different ways, and in many ways broke the mold. So it was, I thought, a fantastic opportunity. And I can remember going to see him for the very first time, and I guess it was something of a job interview, although it didn't really feel like it. And he told me what the plans were for Virgin Galactic. And I must admit, I remember thinking at the moment, at that point, that it sounded pretty crazy, you know. And it reminded me actually of, I think, a story that he tells in one of his books, when he was at a conference like this and invited questions from the audience, and somebody put their hand up at the back and said, "Richard, you know, how do you become a millionaire?" And he said, "That's really easy." All you need to do is to become a billionaire and then start an airline. And I thought, well, if that applies for airlines, it must sure as hell apply to space lines. But then he started to tell me a little bit more about, the plans for it and how they were going about thinking about it and why it was really important. And I became a believer, I guess, and it didn't take me very long to decide to join this remarkable and important project. And one of the things that struck me, I guess, since that time is that in some ways only Virgin could do this. They do have a record and a deliberate philosophy of taking on the conglomerates and moving into their space and really shaking up industries that need shaking up. And maybe space is just the ultimate example of that. We also have a structure at Virgin which is pretty unusual. I think there are over 200 Virgin companies, believe it or not. But they're all very, very separate. It's a very entrepreneurial structure, deliberately so. So that it means you can start things, you can try them. And if it doesn't work, that's fine. You go on to the next thing. And not all of our ideas work. There was a famous company inside Virgin anyway, called Virgin Brides. I don't know if anybody has ever heard of that. Which failed, as we say, because we just couldn't find any customers. One of the big successes, of course, is Virgin Atlantic, the airline. And we're used to now the fact that Virgin flies planes, but of course, in 1984, when that company started, Virgin was a record label. And it was a pretty strange thing for a record label that had signed the Sex Pistols up to decide to take people across the Atlantic in a 747. And indeed, the reason it was started was because Richard was doing a lot of flying back and forth from London to New York to do record deals and so forth. And it struck him that it was a pretty lousy experience, that the airlines were still really sort of looking at themselves as engineering companies with vehicles and incidental cargo which happened to be human, and really paying very, very little attention to the experience. And he just thought, I'm sure I could do this better. We know how to fly airplanes safely. That's sort of done. What we need to concentrate now on is making sure that the people inside have a fantastic time. And I reckon if we did that, we could make a huge success of it. So, got hold of a 747, started Virgin Atlantic. Didn't do a lot of market research, I'm sad to say, but there was a publication in the UK called Marketing Week, who said at the time, this is a brave move that this young entrepreneur Richard Branson is making. And we don't think, it's really the way to build brands. You need to have product focus. And so they did a little survey and said to their readership how many people would be willing to fly on an aircraft with a record label on the tail. And surprise, surprise, they came back with their survey which said that 90% of people said that they wouldn't like to fly on an airline with a record label on the tail. And so Richard wrote back the next week and said, well, thank you very much for doing the market research. I never did. If 10% of the British public are willing to fly with me, I better get some new aeroplanes. And suffice to say he did. And Virgin Atlantic, of course, is now a big and successful long-haul carrier out of the UK. But what about Virgin in the 21st century? Well, we face some enormous challenges down here on Earth. We have a burgeoning global population. We have, a lot of big issues. And I think that, one of the things that we decided as a group going back to the beginning of this century was that if we were going to stay successful and vibrant, we had to really take on those issues head on and use the brand to really to force the pace of change. We've done it with the airlines, and now we're doing it with space. And let me tell you what I mean by that. Space really matters. We've been up there in one way and another for the last 50 years or so for half a century. And already today, if we had a day without space, if everything that we had learned from space, of everything that is flying in space at the moment was just turned off and forgotten, our lives would be very, very different. The way that we navigate, the way that we communicate, the way that we manage agriculture, logistics, the way that we feed this burgeoning global population, absolutely dependent on space. So space really matters. And we thought about this as a group, and also thought about the fact that, a lot of kids that grew up in the 60s, including our boss, were very, very inspired by that, a remarkable decade. If you think about it, at the beginning of the 60s, space was pretty much uncharted territory. And in 1961, President Kennedy stood up and said, you know, that the Americans would put 2 men on the moon, or a man on the moon, by the end of the decade. A crazy thing to say. And during that decade, you know, there was such an intensity of research and development and discovery and a belief that, you know, we could make it happen. And indeed, of course, we did. But since that time, you know, I think a lot of kids that grew up in the 60s have lost that inspiration. Their mothers and fathers were telling them at the time that everybody would be going to space by 1985. You'd be taking a holiday on the moon by 1990, and of course it didn't happen. So that was, I guess, was the fundamental reason that Richard decided that Virgin should go to space. You know, it was a typical industry where he felt that the public were being badly served. It was being run by a conglomerate of government agencies who were not allowing you and me to have this remarkable experience. And he also knew that there was a big commercial opportunity, because space is only going to matter more and more as we seek to solve some of these major challenges that we have in the next decades. So we went out there, registered Virgin Galactic, as you heard Richard say on the video, and said, okay, well, let's get ourselves a spaceship and take people to space. And so we went out and had a look at what was available. And we were a little taken aback, actually, because although what we can do in space has got smarter and smarter, getting people to space and getting things to space, the technology that's used to actually do that really hasn't changed for the last 50 years. We're still using great big ground-based rockets that sort of do the job but are enormously expensive. They're not particularly safe if you're going to put people on board. They're certainly not environmentally friendly. And they're not in the least suitable for a commercial business. And so we went back and thought, well, you know, there isn't a lot of point in trying to do something with something like this, you know, because A, we probably couldn't afford it. B, even if we could, you know, we would end up killing quite a lot of our customers. The environmental impact would be huge and unacceptable. And also, you know, from a commercial standpoint, a complete non-starter, because it would be a little bit like Virgin Atlantic every time they flew from London to New York, dumping the plane in the Hudson and having a new 747 to bring passengers back on. You know, you just can't run a business like that. So we knew that something would have to change. Now, at Virgin, we love commercial aviation, of course. We run airlines around the world, and we knew something about the history of commercial aviation, and some of you may do as well. You know, one of the things that you find if you look back is that the reason that we have this flourishing and incredibly important commercial aviation sector around the world today is largely because of prizes. You know, right at the beginning of the century, when the Wright brothers, year after year, were trying to get their flying machines to work, you know, one of them said to the other, I think the year before they finally made it, that it could be another 1,000 years before this problem was solved. And then they did it. And within a very, very few number of years, there were hundreds of pilots all around the world flying these incredible new flying machines, barnstorming, having fun. Then they thought, yeah, there's some military usage as well. And every time there was a sort of a major milestone passed in aviation, it's generally because somebody had said, that can't be done, and if it can be done, I'm willing to give somebody some money. So the first non-stop flight from London to Manchester, the first flight from America to Ireland. And then, of course, this guy up here, Charles Lindbergh, who I think more than anybody else, with his flight in the Spirit of St. Louis in 1927, really sort of ignited the spark which created the fire of commercial aviation. People suddenly thought, hey, you know, actually there is more to these flying machines than having fun. You know, maybe we could actually, maybe there is some sort of commercial industrial use. And so we have the industry that we have today. And, you know, I think the great thing about prizes is that you're not hedging your bets. You're not saying to one company over here or another company over there, go and try and make this for me. You're really saying to people, look, we don't think this can be done. It sounds pretty crazy. But if you've got the idea, if you think you can do it, whether you're in Singapore or London or Auckland or wherever, then, you know, go for it. And if you manage to do it, there's a big lump of money at the end to make, you know, to help with the commercial viability of your idea. And there was a guy in the United States called Peter Diamandis in the 1990s who was another one of these kids from the 60s who was getting really fed up waiting for somebody to take him to space. And he read the story of Charles Lindbergh, hadn't realized that Charles Lindbergh actually made his flight because of a prize, and thought, well, if it worked for commercial aviation, why shouldn't it work for space? And he put together something called the X Prize, which was a $10 million prize. And the rules were very, very simple. It said, you know, it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter where you live, all you need to do is to build, without any government assistance, a spaceship. And that spaceship needs to be able to fly into space with a man on board, needs to go to at least 100 kilometers above the Earth's surface, needs to return safely, and then it needs to do exactly the same trip with another guy or the same guy on board within a period of less than 14 days. And you know, that was hugely inspirational to a lot of people around the world because, you know, only the world's three most powerful governments have put a man in space with budgets of billions of dollars. And to suggest that somebody could do it effectively out of a garage was interesting. But it certainly inspired people, including this guy here, Burt Rutan. Now, Burt Rutan is, I think, an acknowledged, well, he is an acknowledged genius. He's probably the greatest aerospace designer, engineer in the world today. And in a little company called Scaled Composites in the Mojave Desert north of Los Angeles, has for the last 30 years been developing some of the most innovative experimental aircraft and also spacecraft now that we have seen anywhere. He's done it for government, he's done it for the private sector, and he is an inspirational figure, doing really things that have never been done before when it comes to aircraft and aerospace. And Burt had always had this sort of sense that he could probably put a man into space. And the prize, the Ansari X Prize, the $10 million prize, gave him the, I suppose gave him the reason to do it. And, you know, I think when we found what Burt was doing, you know, we recognized that there was maybe that one chance in our lifetime of getting this industry off the ground in more ways than one, of breaking what had been a real deadlock in terms of space technology, space access technology, and the ability for you and I to experience space for ourselves. And the reason we were so excited about what Burt did was because he was doing something fundamentally different. He was looking at the problem with new eyes and saying, you know, everything that's gone before, we sort of have to forget about because it worked for governments, it actually got us to where we needed to get to, but it's not going to take us into the second space age. And he came up with maybe 3 or 4 really important innovations that convinced us that this was something we should go for. The first one was that he launches his spaceship, as you saw on the video, not from the ground with a great big explosion at ground level, but with a small space plane way up in the sky at 50,000 feet. And you'll see from this next little clip of video
3, 2,
how that works.
release.
So air release at 50,000 feet, and in the outer edges of the atmosphere, the rocket motor on the spaceship starts. And the huge advantage of launching in the air rather than in the ground is firstly safety, because if anything goes wrong, or you want to start again at 50,000 feet, you turn the rocket motor off, you glide down to the runway, sort out the problem, start again. If anything goes wrong when you've got a great big rocket on the ground, then it's probably game over for everybody on board. So a huge advantage of air launch over ground launch. Also, of course, means you need a lot more fuel, a lot less fuel, a lot less energy, because you've already gone through the first 50,000 feet, which of course is where the thickest atmosphere is. The second thing he did was to use a rocket motor, a hybrid rocket motor, which consists, believe it or not, of laughing gas and rubber. So nitrous oxide and old tires, whatever you like to call it. And the beauty, again, of this rocket motor is safety. It's a rocket motor that you can control, you can throttle, you can turn off at any stage. The 2 elements are very benign. They don't do anything when you mix them. You actually have to ignite in order to create the thrust. And here's a little clip of our rocket motor. But that's the world's largest hybrid rocket motor, which is in development. Ground testing will be put in the spaceship in the early part of next year. And then the next thing he did was probably, the next innovation was probably the greatest innovation of all, because, you know, if you talk to people who know about space, they say that getting there, not too difficult, we sort of know how to do that, it's a little dangerous, but we can do it. Once you're up there, not too difficult necessarily. Getting back is really hard, and of course, we do need to get back. We're selling 2-way tickets to space. We also need to get back in a spaceship that can be used again and again and again and again, very much like our 747s that take people around the world. And so Burt put his mind to this, and in a very sort of genius fashion, came up with this incredible simple but inspirational idea, which he based on the shuttlecock. And for those that play badminton, you'll know that a shuttlecock is this sort of little ball with feathers coming out of it. And the thing about a shuttlecock is that if you throw it up into the air, it will always come down with the ball first. So the attitude is controlled aerodynamically. It'll never come down sideways. It'll never come down upside down. The other thing, of course, is that it comes down more slowly than a tennis ball because it has these feathers, which act as drag or air brakes. And Bert, in the middle of one night, tossing and turning in his sleep, trying to work this thing out, thought, how about if I take my little space plane, and when it's in space where shape doesn't matter, I fold it in half. And so it effectively becomes like a shuttlecock, which means that when it comes into the upper atmosphere, even if it comes in sideways or upside down, it will always turn the right way up, aerodynamically. I don't need to involve my pilots. I don't need to involve a computer. It's just going to happen. And then the second thing is that how about, if the way that I fold it in half means that I've got feathers or air brakes that create very, very high aerodynamic drag in the very thin atmosphere so that this spacecraft slows down without the huge heat buildup, which requires thermal protection, to ensure that the spacecraft not only survives but can be used many, many times. And then when I get down to about 70, maybe 70,000 feet, I can unfold my spacecraft again, and I've got a nice light carbon fiber glider, and I can just glide down to the runway, and the job's done. And he built the little Spaceship One, and we can see a little film here, again a clip of those feathered wings in action. And so this is Spaceship One in space, and you can see that the whole tail section there has been folded in half, and it floats down like a sycamore leaf or a shuttlecock into the Earth's atmosphere. And on the 4th of October 2004, Burt Rutan and Scale Composites, a little company in Mojave, did what only, as I say, the world's three largest governments had done before them, and they put a man in space and they brought him back safely. And they actually did it 3 times. They did it one more time than they needed to, and they won the $10 million X Prize. And we at Virgin said, okay, this is our opportunity to do something remarkable, and we seized it. Richard Branson at Virgin is known as Dr. Yes. He tends to say yes to everything. And over the years, because he's almost lost everything a few times, he's put in an organization of people that have a look at his yeses and sometimes say no. And one of the things they didn't say no to, fortunately, otherwise we wouldn't be here today, was Virgin Galactic. But what they did say is, look, before you go off and spend maybe hundreds of millions of dollars on a project which looks like it could work but is still very, very risky, at least make sure you find some people that want to buy the product. And when I started, that's really what I did. And we thought, well, what is the market for this incredible product? Because maybe, we can certainly go to scientists. They'd love to use it. But are scientists really going to put their money down now, maybe 6, 7, 8 years before we're ready to fly? And so we went for the obvious market, really, which was what we call space tourism. We knew that we wanted to go to space, and we thought that probably other people did as well. So we created a website, and we had a press conference, and we used everything that we could to put the message out there that we were launching this new Virgin company. It was based on real technology. You were going to get a fantastic ride. We didn't know when you would get that ride. We didn't know, what the spaceship would necessarily look like. We didn't even know whether you would be eligible to fly at that point. But we had said to people, look, if you want to sign up now, it's going to cost you $200,000. We'd like your money up front, please. And we sort of sat back a little nervously to wait to see what happened. And I have to say we were overwhelmed by the response. Thousands of people, literally from around the world, registered on the website in a matter of days to say, we have been dreaming about this. Go for it. The world needs vision. The world needs, dreamers, and for people to turn dreams into reality. And amongst those thousands of registrations were a few who said, I'm in the fortunate position of being able to pay now. Put me on the list. Here's my money. I want to go as soon as possible. And we very quickly built $10 million of deposits, which is what Virgin had asked us to do at that time, and started to grow this remarkable group of future astronaut customers. And it is a great benefit having early customers, particularly innovative customers, because they make your business so much better. And we could have made some bad mistakes. Those people told us right at the start that yes, they wanted a rocket ride to space. You know, they wanted the G-forces, the vibration, the excitement. And we said, you're going to get that. You're going to be accelerating at 3.5 Gs. You're going to go from 100 knots to the speed of sound in 8 seconds. You'll keep accelerating up to 4 times the speed of sound in 30 seconds. That is going to take your breath away. It's going to be very important. So we're good on that. They said that, yep, they wanted that high acceleration. We said, you're going to be, weighing 3.5 times normal, so we can provide that. And then they said they wanted weightlessness. They'd seen the way the astronauts float around the space station. And we thought, actually, that's a good point, because originally we were going to build quite a small spaceship, and people would have been in their seats, strapped in for the whole experience. They would have gone to space. They would have been astronauts. But people told us very clearly, look, there's no point in being in zero gravity if you're strapped to a seat. And we thought, yeah, you're right there. So we ended up building a much bigger spaceship. And then the other thing that they said they wanted, of course, was the views. And the views from space to Earth are a presentation or a talk in their own right. If you read the accounts of the 520, 30 people that have been to space in the last 50 or so years, these are people that almost had emotion trained out of them. They were selected because they could do a very good job, a very technical job. They could do it safely. They weren't going to get put off balance by, the view outside the window. But funnily enough, those people come back to Earth, almost all of them, and they don't talk about their experience for a day or a week or a month. They talk about it for the rest of their lives, and they are deeply moved and deeply changed by it. And it isn't about the acceleration. It's not about zero gravity. It's about looking out of the windows at Earth. I've got to know quite a few astronauts, actually, in the last 7 years. And one of them is a guy called Prince Sultan, who's the only Muslim astronaut, actually. He's a Saudi prince. He went with the Americans. And he said when he was on the space station, the first day, he and there were other astronauts from other countries were glued to the windows, and they were very excitedly pointing out their countries. There's Saudi Arabia, there's Japan, there's the United States, and trying to describe where the borders were. So the second day, they were together as a group, and they were all pointing out continents and oceans and land masses. And he said on the third day, we just floated by the windows, not saying anything, and looked at the Earth. And it really, really changes people. And one of the very, very exciting things about this project is that we, for the first time in history, are going to be taking people to space for no other reason other than for the experience. And I think we're going to bring people back who are humbled by the experience. I think that, looking at the planet, you realize from space that there isn't another one. There's no planet B, as they say. And, everything that we are, everything that we hope for, everything that, we know, really, is contained in that small, incredibly beautiful, but very vulnerable and fragile piece of rock below. And, until you see that with your own eyes, you don't really get it. So that, I think, is one of the most exciting things about this project for me. So that's the spaceship that we ended up building, and I must move on quickly. And we got on with this project. We've now spent maybe $300–400 million, and we've got a lot to show for it, I'm pleased to say. This is our carrier aircraft. So this is the aircraft which will take the spaceship up to 50,000 feet before it's released. It's the world's largest all-carbon composite vehicle. It's the world's most aviation vehicle, I should say. It's the most fuel-efficient aircraft of its size. And one of the things I love about this project is that the technology that we're developing for space is going to trickle down to commercial use. And so the lessons that we've learned, for example, putting that 140-foot wing spar together, it's a single piece of carbon, the largest carbon spar that has ever been built. That will, I hope, start to transform the commercial aviation industry, because we sure as hell need more efficient aircraft. So that aircraft has been flying now. I think it's flown about 70 or 80 times. It's flown beautifully. It has a unique capability to take heavy payload to high altitude. It will be a training platform for our astronauts as well, and that plane is ready to go. In 2009, we unveiled to the public for the first time our beautiful new spaceship, which we've called Virgin Spaceship Enterprise, VSS Enterprise, rather than USS Enterprise. It takes 6 passengers, 2 pilots. It follows all the same basic design as the little spaceship that you saw that won the X Prize, so the tails fold for re-entry. It's again all carbon composite, 4 times the strength of steel, 1/4 of its weight. And that spaceship is also flying. It's been flying now for, I guess, a year and a half or so. We've now completed just about all the atmospheric tests, and again, this incredible flying machine has performed very well. Just think about it. This one aviation vehicle has got to be able to travel at 4 times the speed of sound. It's got to survive the vacuum of space. It's got to be a high-level glider. And it's got to be a vehicle that can be used hundreds of times. So the flight envelope on this single vehicle is probably larger than just about anything I can think of anyway. We've also tested the re-entry mechanism. You can see it there, and you saw it on the video. And it, again, so far has worked. It's worked perfectly. So the next thing, of course, is to put the rocket motor in. That's been tested on the ground, which we'll do at the beginning of next year. Let me just very quickly, just because I know I haven't got a lot of time left, we are going to be operating out of the United States. And again, it's one of these classic, fantastic stories that Virgin Galactic has been full of, really, that when you launch something spectacular, when you say you're going to do something brave and bold, you know, surprising things happen. And I can remember back in 2005, we had a delegation from somewhere called New Mexico come to visit us in London. You know, and I have to say to our shame that I think most of us didn't even know that New Mexico was in the United States necessarily. But it is. It's a beautiful state. And they came to us and said, look, New Mexico has got this fantastic space heritage. And, you know, we want to build you a spaceport. We think we've got everything right for it. And, you know, and it was one of those incredible deals where Bill Richardson, the governor at the time, said, look, if you build me a spaceship, I'll build you a spaceport. Richard said, well, if you build me a spaceport, I'll build you a spaceship. And there is our beautiful new spaceport in New Mexico that we named and dedicated just a couple of months ago. Another shot of it there. It's a Foster and Partners design building. That's where you will come to train. That's where you'll take your flight to space from. It's an incredibly beautiful place and very, very fitting, I think, for the world's first commercial space line. Our customer numbers continue to grow. I was telling our organizers last night that you know, this community of future astronauts is like nothing on Earth. They come from 46 countries. The youngest is 18. The oldest is over 90 now. Most of them are self-made. They've come from lots of different backgrounds, but they all share this passion, you know, of wanting to pioneer a new industry, of being part of something which is not only exciting, which will give them a terrific experience, but which is actually very, very important, because without these people, we wouldn't have a space line. And I said, actually, I had lunch yesterday with a guy that got in touch with us in Singapore, and over lunch, he signed his contract for not just a seat, but for a whole flight. So he is going to become, or he and his family will become the first family from Asia to become astronauts together, and gave me a check for $1 million. So that was a good day yesterday. And so there are almost 500 of them now. I can't tell you who he is because apparently he hasn't told his wife yet. So, so I've got to stop. But I just want to just finish with going back to this thing that space matters. You know, sometimes governments are very, very good, and often governments are very good at, you know, doing the investment that's needed to, you know, to create the first step, the first stage. They did it with the internet. They did it with mobile telephony. But you know, you often need this early stage technology to be released into the private sector before you see real research and innovation. And that's where we believe we are with space now. You know, governments have got us so far, but if we're going to really open up space and be able to exploit the potential that we need to, you know, whether it's from taking people to space, putting small satellites into space or whatever, then we need private sector innovation to help us do that. And that's our responsibility. And it's one we take seriously. And if we get it right, then we'll start with Virgin Galactic space tours. You know, we'll give this remarkable experience to, I hope, thousands of people over the next 10 years. We already have got a lot of interest from the scientific community. NASA have actually have taken out a $4.5 million contract with us to fly experiments into space at a cost to them which is so negligible compared with you know, the cost that they're used to. I think in fairly short time we'll be able to develop a vehicle which is a little bit like the spaceship, will be launched from the air, but rather than taking people into space, we'll put small satellites into space. Again, another big subject for another presentation, you know, but what we can do with cheap access to space for small satellites is going to be remarkable. And then, you know, if we're really dreaming and looking into the future, that if we manage to run our space line like an airline, if we can prove safety and commercial viability, then we will see that wall of private sector money that will hit this industry. And so traveling around the world via space, you know, becomes a possibility, which would mean London to Australia in maybe a couple of hours rather than 23 hours or whatever it is now, and also gets rid potentially of all the environmental impact of taking aircraft and punching through the atmosphere. So that's how we dream. And I want to just finish, because I am really over now, but I just wanted to finish by reading something which I wouldn't normally do, but just occasionally somebody says something and you think, God, I wish I'd thought of that. I didn't think of it, so I won't pretend. But this was a senator in the United States, no, a congressman actually in the United States at our event in New Mexico. And he talked about Virgin Galactic, and he said, this has something to do with jobs, it has something to do with technology, it also has something to do with science, and all those things. But really, what the world is looking for today in our weariness and in our economic turmoil, in our concerns for tomorrow, the world is looking for a vision. The world is looking for someone to reassure us that it's not about what we have in the bank, but who we are as people, interconnected people across the world. It is about us and our ability to generate visions. It is about us as people being able to overcome every obstacle that falls in front of us. And so what we're experiencing with Virgin Galactic is literally nothing short of being able to get in the back seat with Chuck Yeager as he first breaks the sound barrier, to be on the Mayflower, or maybe with Columbus as he charted across the oceans. And so we have here a renewal of the human spirit that I think is going to infect the entire world. People are desperate and hungry for that belief, and that there is still a sense of dream amongst us, and that there is a sense of adventure, that there is a sense that we're going to be okay. Thank you very much.